Today there is almost a continuum of aircraft sizes as manufacturers develop the airplane family concept of new transport and corporate aircraft. Airports of various sizes are handling increased air traffic that includes everything from heavy wide bodies to small business and recreational aircraft. Along with this increased mix of aircraft comes an increased concern about wake turbulence. Wake turbulence, being a natural byproduct of powered flight, is generated by the lift created by the aircraft wings and helicopter rotor systems. It develops when air rolls up off the wingtips, forming two counter-rotating vortices. The strength and effect of a trailing vortex is predominantly determined by the size, weight, speed, and wing configuration of the aircraft producing it. The strongest and potentially most dangerous wake turbulence is produced when the aircraft is heavy and flying slowly. The vortices from larger aircraft sink initially at about 300 to 500 feet per minute to a maximum of 900 feet below the flight path of the generating aircraft. Vortex strength diminishes with time and is affected by atmospheric conditions and contact with the ground. In calm wind, as the vortices sink close to the ground, they tend to move laterally over the ground at approximately 2 to 5 knots. The vortices are strongly influenced by ambient wind. A strong enough wind will dissipate the turbulence. A light crosswind will decrease the lateral movement of the upwind vortex and increase the movement of the downwind vortex. A tailwind condition can move the vortices forward into the touchdown area. One of the most hazardous situations is a light quartering tailwind.
Northwest 989, clear to land.
Horizon 466, Seattle.
The location and strength of wake turbulence still remains fairly difficult to determine and usually invisible to both the pilot and controller. There are, however, some basic recommended procedures which can be used to assist pilots in avoiding the preceding aircraft's wake. Your aircraft's performance and capability should be considered when applying these procedures. When landing behind a larger aircraft on the same runway, stay at or above its flight path, noting its touchdown point and landing beyond it. In the case of parallel runways closer than 2,500 feet, landing behind a larger aircraft requires the pilots to be aware of possible wind drift towards their runway. Stay at or above the larger aircraft's flight path and note its touchdown. If you are landing behind a larger aircraft on crossing runways, cross above the larger aircraft flight path. If the larger aircraft is departing on the same runway, note its rotation point and land well prior to that point. Here, the larger aircraft is departing on a crossing runway. Note the rotation point. If it is past the intersection, continue your approach and land prior to the intersection. If it rotates prior to the intersection, avoid flying below the larger aircraft flight path. Abandon the approach unless you can land well before the intersection. Be alert for any critical takeoff situation which could lead to a vortex encounter. In takeoff situations, note the departing aircraft's rotation point and rotate prior to it. Be sure to evaluate aircraft performance and determine if it is possible. If necessary, or there is any doubt, delay the takeoff. After takeoff, continue your climb above and upwind of the larger aircraft climb path until turning clear of its wake. Avoid any headings which will place you behind the preceding aircraft path. In the case of an intersection takeoff on the same runway or parallel runways, be alert to adjacent large aircraft, particularly upwind of your position. Avoid subsequent headings which will cause you to cross below a large aircraft path. In the case of an aircraft making a low missed approach or touch and go, wake turbulence may exist along the runway and in your flight path, especially if a light quartering wind exists. Leave an interval of at least 2 minutes before executing a takeoff after a heavy aircraft. If you are en route VFR and you observe a large aircraft above on the same track, avoid the area below and behind its path by adjusting your position laterally, preferably upwind.
Air Coach 545 Park, rate.
The other key player directly involved with avoiding wake turbulence is air traffic control. Air traffic controllers are required to provide radar and wake turbulence separation or visual separation until the pilot accepts visual separation or a visual approach. The primary considerations that affect the controller's ability to control traffic safely, orderly, and expeditiously are the types of approaches available, instrument flight rules or visual flight rules, mix of traffic, jet, propeller, or helicopter, traffic density, wake turbulence separation, and noise abatement requirements. Traffic density is the major factor in the amount of airplanes that can be safely, orderly, and expeditiously landed or departed. The busiest airports schedule takeoffs and landings based on weather conditions. Visual conditions and visual separation allow air traffic control to handle more aircraft in the traffic control system. Air traffic controllers can gain more flexibility in handling aircraft still under IFR control by clearing aircraft to maintain visual separation or a visual approach.
Radar 1101, cleared mall visual approach, runway 34 left, advise when you have that traffic in sight.
There are several factors a controller should consider before clearing an aircraft to maintain visual separation or for a visual approach when wake turbulence separation must be applied. An aircraft upwind from a larger aircraft is unlikely to encounter any wake turbulence. However, it is not always possible or practical to have a smaller aircraft follow a larger aircraft on the upwind side. Another consideration controllers need to make is the flight path of the preceding aircraft compared to the flight path of the following aircraft. A steep descent of larger aircraft could create a hazard for smaller aircraft following on a normal descent to the same runway. As you can see, at some time, the smaller aircraft would be below the flight path of the larger jet. When practical, air traffic controllers should advise the following aircraft of the leader's steep descent. Faster aircraft following slower aircraft can create a serious wake turbulence problem by easily getting too close. The separation distance provides time for the wake turbulence to dissipate as well as descend. Intersecting runways can also create a hazard when a small aircraft is cleared to land on a runway where the flight path will take it through the flight path of a larger aircraft that was landing or departing on a different runway.
The best method for avoiding wake turbulence is both pilot and controller awareness. Controllers must know where wake turbulence could occur and how it will affect other following aircraft. Crosswinds, steep descents, different airspeeds, and crossing runways are just some of the factors controllers should consider. Pilots also have to be aware of where potential hazards exist. Sometimes giving a caution wake turbulence advisory is not enough. The pilots need to know if the aircraft they are following is on a steeper than normal descent, is flying slower than they are, or if it is landing on another runway. If there is a potential for wake turbulence hazard, the controller needs to inform the pilot of it and allow the pilots to adjust their flight paths accordingly. Conversely, it is the pilot's responsibility to keep air traffic controllers informed of flight profiles outside of the normal operation. When it's operationally beneficial, air traffic control may authorize the pilot to conduct a visual approach to an airport or to follow another aircraft in VFR weather conditions. The pilot must have the airport or the preceding aircraft in sight before the clearance is granted.